Rehabilitation and Rehabilitation as a tribal welfare measure Rehabilitation as a tribal welfare measure and evaluative study. An evaluative study by V.S. Upadhyay. By V.S. Upadhyay. So in this we were discussing about 4 different tribes who were resettled into different colonies and what were the problems that they faced over there, which were because of which they were hesitant to resettle in those colonies. Either they initially these families belonging to these 4 tribes were hesitant to move and settle in these colonies, and even few families who moved into these colonies within a span of 1 or 2 months they managed to vacate those places and move back either to the forest or to some other villages nearby. And in many cases what was observed was these people tried to grab whatever they can, including the doors, metal railings and whatever that could fetch them money. They looted all those things and they left these settlement colonies because they were not happy living over there. So as part of that we were discussing the various problems faced by each of these tribes, what were the specific problems which they had and what were the common problems which all of them had. So we were discussing about 4 different tribes which were resettled in these colonies. They are the Birjias, the Hilkarias, then the Malpaharias. I'm sure you know Malpaharias very well, isn't it? We discussed about the Malay tribes or the Malpaharias when we discussed the concept of nature man spirit complex, isn't it? So those are the Malpaharias. So all of these 3 tribes, that is the Birjias, Helkarias and the Malpaharias, these are traditionally shifting cultivators. And then we were also discussing about the Birhors, who are basically nomadic tribes. Birhors who are nomads. So first we shall discuss the specific problems faced by each of these tribes, under which we will be discussing first about the specific problems faced or the specific issues which the Birhors faced. So Birhors, as I already told you, they are nomads, that is they are nomadic people who move from one stretch of the forest to the other along with their cattle in search of new green pastures and in search of fodder for the cattle, and also they move to places where they have more abundance of resources which are conducive for both their sustenance as well as for the sustenance of their cattle. So for these people, that is the Birhors, who are basically traditionally nomadic people, they do not have any attachment over the land, and they do not have the concept of settled living. That is, they do not even know what settled life is, like living in one place and going on ahead with that lifestyle. So what we tried to do by resettling them is we were trying to push them to the opposite extreme way of their life, isn't it? So nomadic means they keep moving, they do not settle in any place, they keep moving from one place to another, and that has been their and that has been their way of life, not their wife. I don't know why. So it is not the wife, it is the way of life. So nomadism or moving nomadic, being nomadic in nature has been their way of life. That has been their lifestyle since several generations, since the times of their ancestors. And now by pushing them into some resettlement colony, we try to bring about a change in their entire pattern of life. So that itself was a huge hindrance for them. So further, they also faced many problems, like I told you, they live in small huts called as tanda. Okay, their entire settlement is called as tanda, and the small huts which they live, it is called as kumba. So they live in small huts called as kumba, which are made of leaves and other forest resources. And their entire settlement, say there was a settlement like this which consisted, say, around some 10 to 15 houses. So this entire settlement was called as tanda. Okay, so these people did not have any knowledge about settled life or how to live in a settled way of living, and they had the settlement called as tanda and the huts which were made out of leaf called as kumba. So what these people usually did was they lived on the fringes of the forest. So what they would do is they would collect minor forest produce from the forest, like say small animals they could hunt. They could hunt small birds and animals. They could collect minor forest produces like flowers, fruits, small other articles, whatever which they can get from the forest, which is of use to the other people in the villages. So once in a week, say when there's a weekly market or a monthly market or any other traditional markets which are set up every now and then, they would come out of the fringes of the forest. They would go into the villages. They would sell these products, and they used to use that money to buy other products like clothing or any other products which they need for their existence. So this is the kind of life that they were living. But the traditional settlement, that is a settlement colony which was created by the government, was located very far away from the villages. As a result, it hindered their activities, isn't it? So that was one of the difficulty which they faced. Okay, so the traditional settlement is usually formed by men related to one kin group. So in their traditional settlement, that is a tanda, they had one old man which they could call as the grand old man, who was considered as the political head as well as the religious head. So you can see, at least in movies, when you see any tribes, when they show tribes or some songs where they show the tribes, some rituals happening in a tribal hamlet, they'll show the one very old man will be considered as a head of the tribe or the chief of the tribes, and he will be having enormous respect value. They will bring him in a planquin, or they will greet him with lot of respect. They will allow him to sit on a stage, and all the other people will perform the other rituals, and they will celebrate it like this. So for every tanda or settlement, there used to be a grand old man who was considered as both the political and religious head. So any rituals, any customs, or any activities which they, worshipping activities, worshipping of their ancestors, or superstitious activities, or any rituals, be it marriage or whatever activities they do, it will be officiated by this headman, or the head of the chief, or head of the tribe. That is the chief head of the tribe. He is called as the headman, and he was considered as the political as well as the religious head of this entire tanda. So he is also the priest of the for every tanda or every settlement, there used to be a deity which they would worship, just like how we can see this concept in villages also, isn't it? So many times when you travel on highways, you can find at the entrance of every village there will be a huge structure of a deity that is considered as the god of that particular village, and all the villagers will assemble, once in a year. They will worship that deity and ask the deity or that god to protect their village. So they believe that that is the god which protects their village and brings all good fortune to the village. So like that, even in every traditional settlement of the bir horse, there used to be a deity for that settlement which was called as the Khun Tan. Okay, the name of that deity was called as Khun Tan, and they used to worship that. And the priest who would officiate as the priest is that the old man belonging to their tribe or belonging to that settlement. So this was how their life was earlier in the forest. Then traditionally they follow the practice during childbirth, that after a woman in that entire tanda has delivered a child, what will happen is the entire Tanda will observe a state of pollution for 29 days. So what they will do is, first 7 days they will not do any puja or any sacrifice. Okay, then what happened when they were resettled into a government colony was, there were many families belonging to different tandas who were resettled into the same colony. So it became difficult for them to observe these pollution rituals, isn't it? So when they were in the forest, you can see, suppose this tanda consists around some 12 to 15 houses. If in any of this house, if any woman gives birth to a child, they would observe very seriously, they would observe a practice of pollution. So for 21 days they would not do any puja or sacrifice, and all of the members belonging to this entire tanda would strictly follow that. But in the government resettlement colony, there were members belonging to different tandas who were settled into a single colony, as a result of which they could not practice this purification and pollution rituals. That also became a hindrance for them. Then also, after 6 days of pollution, the infant is taken out of the hut, but not through the ordinary door. So after a childbirth, after 6 days only, they will allow the mother to bring the child outside the hut, but they will not do it to the main entrance. Instead, they will have another separate entrance to the hut, through which the child will be brought out. So they believe this will protect the child from being bitten by snakes and being attacked by tigers and other animals. So this is their belief. So in resettlement colonies, they did not have any such provisions because the houses had a single door only. That also was a drawback. Then again, in Birhos, the death pollution is so strong that suppose there's a death of a member in a tanda, what they believe is that this tanda is not fit to be lived. We cannot live in this tanda anymore, and all the members belonging to that tanda will abandon that entire tanda, and they will move to a new place and they will make a new tanda over there. So these kind of activities they could not do in the government resettlement colonies. Next, moving then also in Birhors, they have a practice of having a dormitory where all the grown-up boys and girls used to live over there. So what will happen is, each of the nuclear families will be living in the huts, but once their kids reach of age, say they enter into teenage or they reach the adolescent age, they hit puberty, after that the children will no longer stay in the same family as that of the parents. Instead, for that entire tanda or entire hamlet, tribal hamlet, they will have a separate house called as a dormitory, where all the girls and boys belonging to that entire hamlet, once they reach adolescence or once they come of age, they will go and live in those dormitories, including both boys and girls. There they will have a lot of fun, they will play, they will do a lot of activities. So this is how. But these things of dormitory were not taken into consideration when the government made the resettlement colonies. So these were all various issues which the Birhors faced. Again, this dormitory was called as Gitiora. So the dormitory of the Birhos, where the grown-up boys and girls used to go and stay, live over there, that is called as the Gitiora. So there was no provision for Gitiora in the government resettlement colonies. So these were the few specific issues which were faced by the Birhors. Next, moving on to the issues which were faced by the Malpaharias. Now moving on to the issues faced by the Malpaharias. So the Malpaharias are traditionally shifting cultivators, and they occupy the forested and hilly regions of Ranchi and Palmau districts. And in addition to shifting cultivation, these people actively practice food gathering and making bamboo handicrafts. Okay, these Malpaharias, they are traditionally shifting cultivators. They occupy the hilly regions of the forest in Ranchi and Palmau districts. And in addition to that, they also practice food gathering and also making handicrafts out of bamboo. And they prefer the door of their hut should face east. Okay, so even in other places also you can find many Vastu consultants. Whenever you buy a property, or when you're looking out for a property for or you're looking out for a flat or a house or even a plot of land. So they will tell you which direction it is facing and how to construct the house, what are the, where we should have the water source, where you should have the kitchen, isn't it? So usually you can find that many people prefer east facing, property which is facing the east. They believe that because the sun rises in the east, it will bring in positive energy into the house, whereas most people do not prefer west facing doors or west facing properties. How many of you all know about this? Just let me know. It is not just only for the property, even when we sleep also, isn't it? It is many a times you would have heard your parents or elders at home tell you to sleep such that your head is on the west or either in the north, I guess, right? Either your legs should be on the east and your head should be in the west direction, and otherwise it should be on um, otherwise it should be on the south. So your head should be on the south and your legs should towards the north direction, isn't it? So there is a reason for that. See, when we go to sleep, our blood circulation is, it has to be the flow has to be smooth, isn't it? The blood circulation in a body has to be constant and it should be smooth, so that all the organs of the body including the head gets equal good amount of supply of blood. And if you sleep in other directions other than this, because of the magnetic geomagnetism, there is chances that there will be disturbances in the blood circulation throughout, in the proper blood circulation throughout your body, as a result of which you might not get a good sleep. Okay, so that is the reason. Similarly, even for looking for property or even the direction in which we prefer our house to face, or the main door or the main entrance of our house to face, it is usually east direction is mostly preferred, because it is a direction in which the sun rises and it is believed that it brings in positive energy, right? So fine. So even the Malpaharias also prefer that the door of the hut should face east direction, whereas in a government resettlement colony you cannot look for all those conditions, right? So these were a few of the reasons. Then even here also they abandon the hut after the death of a person. So suppose in a family, when they are staying in a particular hut, if one member of the family dies, they will not live in that hut anymore. They will abandon that hut and they will move to a new place and construct a new hut. Do you think that is possible for us in cities and towns? It is not a possibility, right? Fine. Then when a large number of deaths happen, they will abandon that entire settlement place. Okay, so that entire hamlet where the tribe has been living, if suppose there is some disease or famine or whatever reason, because of that, if there are several deaths in that entire tribal hamlet, they will altogether believe that there is something negative over there, and that is why many people are dying, and so they will abandon that hamlet altogether, and all the members will move to a new region and they will set up a new hamlet and build new houses and start living over there. So these were not possible in the government resettlement colony. Next comes the Birjias. So the Birjias are the tribes who, again, Birjias are also shifting cultivators. They inhabit the deeper and most dense forest areas. Okay, and because of that, they do not have much contact with the other tribes, because they are living in deep, very deep forested areas. They have a lot of sense of spirit and freedom. Okay, and they also do shifting cultivation, and they also cut bamboo, and they use bamboo for construction of the huts, and they also make bamboo handicrafts. And there are two kinds of Birjias, that is Rash Birjias and Doodh Birjias. So among the Birjias itself, there are two types, that is Rash Birjias and Doodh Birjias. So among them, the Rash Birjias are the ones who consume beef, whereas the Doodh Birjias do not consume beef. So within them, again there is division into two groups. One is the Raj and the other is the Doodh. And the first group consumes beef, and the second group, that is Doodh, does not consume beef. So they have a common idea that the Doodhs, that is the second group of Birjias, the Doodh Birjias, they considered the Raj Birjias as lower to them, isn't it? Because they consume beef. But what happened in the resettlement colonies was all these people were resettled in a single colony, in the, that is the Birjia colony at Beti. So without taking into consideration whether they are Raj or whether they are Doodh, all of these families were resettled into this Birjia resettlement colony at Beti, at a place called as Beti. So here they did not like living with each other because the Doodhs considered the Raj as inferior to them because of the practice of consumption of beef. So that was a problem. Okay. So traditionally inside the forest, these two groups, that is the Doodh Birjias and the Raj Birjias, do not live together. They live in separate settlement colonies. They live in separate settlements, whereas here in the government resettlement colony, they were forced to live in the same colony, and that was not desirable for either of them. Okay, so that was a problem. And when the Birjias do ancestral worship, they have a practice of sacrificing black fowl. So there's a bird called as black fowl, isn't it? So this is a common practice among the Birjias to sacrifice this black fowl in whatever rituals they do. But when the government resettled them over here to this resettlement colony, they offered them Rhode Island red poultry. They did not offer them black fowl. They offered them some sort of red poultry, Rhode Island red poultry. So what these people did is they cut the poultry, they cooked it, they ate it, and they left the colonies because it was not of any use for them, isn't it? So they were not interested in rearing the poultry. So what they did is either they sold the fowl, okay, and many a times they sold it off because it was of not any use to them, and otherwise they used to cook it and eat it, and they could not, they did not utilize it. Whatever the government gave him was of no use for them. Then again, during the in the Birjias also, a woman who has given birth to a child observes pollution for 10 days and she has to keep separate from others, and it is provided a new passage to move out of the house. So even among the Birjias, a woman who has just given birth is not allowed to enter into the main house. She is given a tiny corner of the house where she has to live for 10 days until the pollution rituals are conducted, and from there she is not supposed to utilize the same entrance as the others. Instead, she will have a back entrance which she has to use to go out and come for whatever activities. So those provisions were not available in the government resettlement colony. Okay, then again here among the Birjias also, when suppose there is a death of a member in their settlement, they also practice pollution rituals during which they do not exchange food or drinks with other people outside of their traditional hamlet or their traditional settlement. But here what happened in the government resettlement colonies where different people from different settlements were all put together. So now they did not know with whom they are not supposed to exchange food or water. So they could not properly practice all their pollution rituals. So that also became a hindrance for them. So we already know how much the traditions, ritual, practice and the culture is important for tribes, isn't it? So it is a very essential part of their life, and they do not want to compromise on that for any cost or for any reason. And that is why we have to consider all of these whenever we make any programs for them, be it when we discuss the problems in education and the problems in employment, and also the health issues also when we discuss the problems of tribal communities. I told you how the doctor has to take into confidence the priest who is going to worship for them. He just cannot go to the tribes and tell them, no, what your priest is telling or whatever rituals or whatever prayers he is offering on your behalf for your cure is not going to work. It is my medicines which is going to cure you. he cannot do that, because the tribes have lot of belief in their practices, rituals, magic, religion, belief and all. So what the doctor has to do is he has to take that priest or the sorcerer into confidence. Not a sorcerer, that priest, whoever is praying for him, he has to take him into confidence, and he has to convince the people that whatever medicine that I am going to give you is going to get the blessings from the priest, and that will help you to get a cure faster. So like this, it has to go hand in hand, and we cannot overnight change their belief system, isn't it? Fine. So similarly here also, they have these death rituals. So when the person in the family dies, they will, that entire tribal hamlet, all the family members belonging to those 12 or 15 families, they will not exchange food or water with outsiders, nor will they use the same source of water. Say there is a river stream, and if there's a death of the member in that hamlet, all of them will not use the same river stream which is being used by other members outside of their tribal settlement. So all these were not all these provisions were not made available in the government resettlement colonies. Say there was a common well, so now neither could they use the same well to fetch water which the others were using, nor did they have any other source to fetch water. So these very simple things also mattered a lot, and it persuaded them not to stay in these government resettlement colonies. Then coming to the hill Karyas. Hope you all are following. Hill Karyas. So hill Karyas are one among the most backward among these four tribes. So whatever the four tribes which we are discussing now, that's the Birhors, Birjias, Malpaharias and the hill Karyas. Among all these four, the hill Karyas are the most backward ones, and they lead a life of food gatherers. They are basically food gatherers, and the forest occupies an important source of food for them. They collect roots and fruits. Okay, and many of them nowadays you can find them working as agricultural laborers. And what happens for these people is, since they are traditionally they are food gatherers, so they keep collecting food, fruits, tubers and roots in the forest, and many of them now have become agricultural laborers. So when they were resettled into these colonies, it became difficult for them to find labor in agricultural fields, because the settlement colonies were situated very far away from the villages. So that was a hindrance for them, and they could not get employed. So because usually they used to live in the fringes of the forest, where they could go to the nearby villages, they could do some work. They used to work as agricultural laborers, they used to get some money, and they used to return back. But now these resettlement colonies were situated very far away from the villages, and that became difficult for them to get gainful employment. And the traditional house of the Karyas has only one room without any window. So I think I told you this earlier also. The Karyas are the most backward among all these four tribes which we did discuss so far, and these tribes make a hut with only a single entrance, that is a single door, and they do not have any windows whatsoever. So why is it they do not have any windows in their huts? They believe that if there is a window, it will be a entry, or it will act as a entrance for the entry of negative spirits or all these negative things into their hut. Okay, so they believe that the windows are an entrance of bad spirits, isn't it? So they believe if they have a window in their hut, the bad spirits will enter inside the house. So that is why they do not have any windows in their huts. But in the government resettlement colonies, all the houses will look similar. All of them will have a single door, single one or two windows. So they could not make modifications that. So these were also various cultural hindrances for them. Then they also go on a hunting expedition to invoke the mountain spirits. So what they do is, whenever they have to conduct any ritual or any activities, they will go to the nearby mountain where they believe their spirits are residing. So they will invoke the spirits and they will worship the spirits. But now when they are in a resettlement colony, probably that would not have been situated close to a mountain. As a result, their culture traditions get disturbed. This was also a drawback. Okay, there also many times for all these tribes, one common problem was there. They all believed that there is a place in the kitchen next, the hearth of the kitchen. Next to that, there's a place where the their gods or their good spirits will reside, and it will protect the entire household. But in these colonies, what was the case is, they used to have a common kitchen for that entire colony. So they believe that the good spirits or the spirits which protect them, they are present or they are limited only to the kitchen, and their houses are not protected enough. As a result, they will not have a good life over there. So like this, few more problems also they had. So now that we discussed the specific issues of each of these tribes, now I will tell you what are the common issues which were a hindrance for them to move into these resettlement colonies, and which forced them to move out of the colonies as well. So as I already told you, first and foremost thing which need to be kept in mind is their level of assimilation. So even though we discussed 3 different tribes over here who are shifting cultivators, few of them would have given up shifting cultivation long ago, and for them to move out of the forest and to take up some other activity will be relatively easier in comparison to another tribe who has still been traditionally following shifting cultivation. Isn't it? Say there is one tribe which has given up shifting cultivation since some 3-4 generations, and they are taking up other activities or they are working as laborers. For them to move out of the forest, it won't be a huge issue. Whereas there will be some tribes who are even in present day practicing shifting cultivation, and their entire life revolves around that, and their level of assimilation or contact with the outside world is very less. So for them, moving them out will be a much more difficult task. And when you bring all these people together and put them into a single resettlement colony, there is so much of differences in their culture, in their practices, in their pollution and purification rituals, whatever they are practicing, and there becomes a conflict arises between the different tribes. Say in the case of a headman or a political or religious head. So in different settlements, as I already told you, in different settlements or in different tandas, there will be one old man who is considered as the religious and political head. So when 2 or 3 different settlement people are put together in one colony, what will happen is each one consider their their religious or political head as the head of the settlement, whereas the other people will not abide by the rules which are put forward by the old man belonging to one particular settlement. So what happens here is, when members belonging to different tandas or different settlements are put together in one single colony, there will be 2 or 3 religious head, there will be 2 or 3 political head, and they do not know whom they should really consider as their head. Now there arises a conflict, isn't it? Same way, so there is first place, there is psychological maladjustment. So these tribal communities are so acclimatized and so much become one and one with the nature of the forest, that it becomes very difficult for them to adjust to a life devoid of the forest. Okay, so their ancestors, their several generations have been living in the forest since hundreds of years. They have been used to this free life without any control, without limitations, without anybody questioning them, and altogether you move them out of that, it becomes a huge psychological change. It is too much for them to handle. Okay, so they are not ready to surrender the freedom which they are having inside the forest. Even though yes, inside the forest they would have been facing several problems like poverty, difficulty in access to food or water and everything, still they have a lot of freedom that they do not want to give up for the sake of having a better life in the outside world. Isn't it? It's just like how you take a bird which is free living, which is freely flying in the skies, and you put it inside a golden cage. Yes, in the golden cage it will be offered food and water and all the comforts, but still it does not have the freedom to live its life flying high in the sky, isn't it? Similarly, so they do not want to lose the freedom of roaming in the wild, okay, and they do not want to be controlled by others, by domination, by leaders. All this control they could not accept. Then as I already told you, who will be the political and religious head? So every tribal settlement will have a old man who is considered as the religious and political head. Now when 2-3 settlements people are put into one single colony which has been created by the government, now there is a confusion as to who will be the religious and political head of that entire colony. So this group of people will say their headman, and another group will say that their headman should be the head. So that leads to conflict between the tribes belonging to different tandas or different settlements. Then festivals cannot be celebrated separately. So usually if you notice that in one settlement of say 10 to 15 members, whatever happens, be it a death ritual or be it a marriage or any festivals which they are celebrating, all of them will get together, and if there's a death, all of them will practice the pollution and purification rituals. Okay, there's nothing like one person will be invited or one person will not be invited, one is my friend, one is my enemy. They do not have any such concept. So all of them will participate in the festivals, all of them will drink, dance and have fun. Same is the case with whenever there's a childbirth or any other activity. Here, when there are two or three different groups of people, that is members belonging to different settlements put together in a single resettlement colony made by the government, there's a confusion as to whom they should invite or whom they should not invite, and that puts them in a lot of stressful situations. Then so when the tribal families, we do not have the concept of joint family. So whenever a son gets married, he will move out of the hut and he will start his own new family along with his wife and children, and he will construct a new hut and he will start living. So in the government resettlement colony, every nuclear family was provided with a single house only. So in that house, suppose they have a child a son who's in the age of marriage. After his marriage, where will he go? They do not have the provision of constructing a new house in the settlement colony for their son. So that was also a problem, as a result of which the son after marriage, either he had to move to a nearby village, abandoning the colony, or either he has to move back to the forest itself. So this was also a problem. Same with the case of property. So here suppose a family had some 2 or 3 sons. So what would they do with the single house? How would they divide that to their sons as a property? Isn't it? So like this they faced several problems. Then again, one important thing which I told you was the level of assimilation and the level of attachment of these tribes with the forest. So there are some tribes who are very well assimilated with the mainstream society, and for them, moving them outside of the forest is not a very difficult task. They are very easily they can adapt to the outside environment. But for few tribes who are living in deep jungles, hilly forested areas where they have minimal contact with the outside world and they are still practicing their traditional way of life, bringing them out of the forest will be a huge challenge, because it is a complete 360-degree change in the way of their life. So I hope you understood all of this. So these were the common problems faced by the when actually what happened was, in this case study made by V.S. Upadhyay, he went to each of these tribal families, that is these 4 tribes. Few of these members belong to few families. They were resettled into 3 or 4 government resettlement colonies, and he asked them why they abandoned the colonies and why they moved out of the colonies, what exactly were their problems. He conducted a lot of straight questions, interviews with them, questionnaires with them, and based on that only he made this case study. So I hope you understood this very well.